Good day, everyone. My name is Kayode Etsi. I am a safety trainer and consultant. Welcome if this is the very first video you're watching. It's basically a series of videos on how to pass the IG2 section of the Nebosh IGC exam, the practical section. Now, the practical has four parts, so I decided to make four different videos. I have part one and part two on this page, so you could check to see the beginning of the series. This is the part three, and then part four would also follow, hopefully, immediately. Okay, so for a general overview, the part one is basically about you introducing your organization and the area that you risk assess to your examiner. Remember that the examiner is not going to go there. They are not going to get any pictures from you. So you're going to decide or the foundation of your risk assessment. Describe the organization, describe the area, tell them the sources you consulted for this particular practical. And then you go on to part two to discuss the actual risk assessment. Part three is basically about you convincing the management to implement the controls that you've recommended in the part two, the actual risk assessment. So you have a bunch of controls. Now, in this part, we need you to give your organization a reason to implement this control. Remember, I said that the practical is very sensitive. It doesn't have a cutoff mark. There are 18 criteria, and if you do not rather meet any of these criteria, you're going to get a refer. For the part three has three major criteria. The very first thing that you need to do in the part three is to decide on three actions that you will be prioritizing. Basically, from the controls that you recommended in part two, these controls would come from different hazards. Now, there is a confusing part here, and I will try to make it as straightforward as possible. Now, for these three actions, you have two options. Option number one is straightforward. You bring one control, rather, from three different hazard categories. In your part two, you had a minimum of 5 categories. So you're bringing at least one control from one hazard category. That's option number one. Option number two is that you are allowed to bring 2 controls. These controls, for those of us that might not know, are coming from the 4th column in your part 2. So for more information about that column, please watch the second video and also consult your IG2 guidance document. Now you're bringing, for a second option, maximum of 2 controls from one hazard category. Maximum of 2 controls. That is, in that case, the 3 actions are going to be from just 2 categories. The first option is 3 different categories for your 3 different actions. And the second option is you have 1 category, but then you're bringing 2 controls from this 1 category. Mind you, these 2 controls should not come from the same hazard. Also, for understanding of the difference between your hazard and the hazard category, go back to the IG2 video. Also, you could consult your IG2 guidance document. I'm referring us back to these videos and the document because I don't want us to keep repeating, or me rather, to keep repeating the same information over and over again. And that's why I made the videos separately. Okay. So let's go to the criteria. The first one is to prioritize 3 actions. How do you decide? You have a minimum of 10 hazards. How do you know which ones you're going to prioritize? Now, the idea is straightforward. Just look for the most dangerous of your 10 hazards, right? You have something from slip, trips, and fall, not in a very dangerous environment, maybe trailing cables. You have asbestos for hazardous substance. You have possible explosion in the tank farm. So you know that you're going to be picking the explosion first, followed by your exposure to asbestos before you select the slip, trip, and fall. So basically, you're looking at the ones with the highest risk in terms of likelihood and severity. Which one will kill people faster, basically? So pick 3 from your hazards, and then go to your control measures and look for the best controls that you've given for that hazard, and then bring it to this particular part. Now, another thing that people don't pay attention to is that you have in your template, you have an option for 3 justifications. Justification 1 should be of higher risk than justification 2. Same thing applies to 2 to 3. So basically, you're looking at it as an hierarchy. Do not, for these 3 things I mentioned, if I put slip, trip, and fall as justification 1 and fire as 2, my examiner might pay attention and call me out for that. So after selecting 3 for my hazard, I also need to, for these 3, still put them in the categories of highest priority. So I go for justification 1, justification 2, justification 3, like that. Now, we're going to discuss the kind of information that are required in these different sections for the justification. But now, just make sure you select 3 priorities. That gets you a met for the very first category. So let me read that criteria rather out for you. The criteria says 3 actions should be selected. So if you select 3 actions, you're going to get a met in that particular section. Remember, those 3 actions should be of the highest priority. You are the one that gets to decide the highest priority, looking at the severity, and also do not forget the likelihood, because the risk is a combination of both. Okay, so the second criteria is the moral, financial, and legal discussion or argument. Now, it's straightforward. For the first column, these new templates, they really helped by dividing everything to different sections so you know where to put what. The very first section you have in part 3 is for you to discuss the moral, financial, and the general legal argument. Go back to your notebook, your manuals. You have a bunch of things for moral argument in your element 1, where you talked about providing a safe place of work, providing safe plant and equipment, providing safe system of work, training and supervising the workers, making sure the workers are competent. These are the moral obligations as stated by ILO C155 and R164. Now, you can use these different moral obligations to support your argument. You're not going to list this information. You're basically just going to put it in a discussion in relation to the organization you selected. For example, if I was going to use safe place of work and I use an hotel for my risk assessment, and one of my hazards was about an electrical fault in one of the rooms, I will say that as an organization in the hospitality industry, we have a moral obligation, or the organization has a moral obligation to ensure that the work environment, or the environment generally, is safe for both the workers and the customers. The customers in this place are the guests in your hotel. So the presence of faulty electrical equipment is against this moral obligation. Class, just like that. So you make sure that you link this moral argument as much as you can. Look out for at least 3, 4. Other moral arguments are the duty of care that organization has to their employees. We have avoiding pain and suffering. That's the most common one. Every worker comes to work to earn a living. Putting them in an unsafe condition could lead to injury that would then lead to pain and suffering for both the workers, their family, and their co-workers, loved ones in general. So at least look for 3, 4 moral arguments to give. Then you go to your financial argument. Same thing applies. You go to your manual, you check for direct and indirect costs that you have. What are the costs following accident? Basically, we have the cost of repair and replacement of equipment, medical costs, legal costs, loss of experienced worker, reduction in staff morale, loss of reputation of the organization, fines and penalties, possible cost, loss of raw materials. These are the possible financial arguments. Continuous sick pay in case the worker has to take a sick leave. So you just list the points somewhere, take 3 or 4, and then discuss them as they're relevant to your organization. In the sample that we got from Nebosh, the financial cost was categorized into 3. You can also do that same style. It makes your work good. You first list discuss the cost associated with the workers, like medical compensation when they get injured, sick pay, replacing and train the worker, having to train a new worker. And then you discuss the possible cost associated with the damage of equipment or loss of equipment. And then you finally discuss the cost from enforcement actions generally. So you discuss the moral argument, you discuss the financial argument, and then you also go ahead to give a general overview. Now, this part 3 has a section for each justification where you pick specific legal arguments. We will talk about that in a bit. But for this first section, you can also give a general argument. Basically, what you're going to say is the hazards or the unsafe condition and unsafe practices that you observe in your risk assessment is a non-compliance to a number of legislations. You could give your national legislations, also you could give UK legislations. They like that really well. And then you could also discuss ILO. So basically, you're not giving articles, you're not citing any laws, you're just saying that, okay, this unsafe actions and unsafe conditions that you observe are in non-compliance to a number of legislations. You can state one or two, and then you talk about the implication of this non-compliance. Basically, you say something like the fact that it would lead to enforcement actions, possible persecutions of the workers or the organization itself, just general legal implications like that. And then you will now go on to discuss each justification. Okay? So I'm just going to pick one of the justifications, and then I tell you how to fill in the sections, and then you do the same for the remaining two justifications. All right? Okay, so basically for justification, your justification, let's pick justification number 1. First thing you have to do is you have to go ahead and write the control measure that you are prioritizing. Then you go to that particular hazard, and then you pick your best control. Usually it would be the control that eliminates that hazard or drastically reduce the risk. So I'm going to write that control measure exactly the way I have it in my part 2. Some people end up writing a new control measure. Be very careful with that. So go to your part 2, copy that control measure, the best one you have, and then bring it to this part 3. In bracket, in that very first section, you put the hazard category that you've brought that control from. Not the hazard, the action itself, and then in bracket, the hazard category. So for my hazardous substances, I could say that replacement of all hazardous contained materials with with all asbestos contained materials with materials that do not contain asbestos. In bracket, I'm going to put as a category hazardous substances, basically. Okay, so that's the first thing I do. For the second section, I am going to discuss the likelihood and severity. Now, the likelihood and severity is talking about the hazard from which I picked that control measure from. Okay, so what are the possibility that people are going to get injured? What are the possibilities that people are going to be exposed to the asbestos? What are the possibilities that is going to be an explosion? And then what are the possible consequences if this unsafe conditions or unsafe acts end up leading to an accident? Now, the common mistakes I see in this section is that people actually they write one or two likelihood and then move on to control measures. They move on to severity. You have to be very, very careful with that. So, for example, let me pick an hazard, and then we give likelihood and severity. So let's say, for example, that on my site, we have a cable. We have a power cable on my site, and the power cable is right on top of our gate. The cable is dangling, utility cable is dangling, and then is right on top of our gate, the entrance to the site. I'm going to say that there's a possibility of arcing as a result of the proximity between that cable and the gate. That could increase the risk of arcing. There is also a likelihood that we can have heavy-duty trucks going in and out. There's a possibility that excessive wind will lead to that cable cutting, and then there's going to be contact with the gate, exposing everyone to electricity. So basically, there could be rainfall that would reduce the resistance of people and the gate. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of likelihood. I'm going to talk about the frequency of vehicles going in and out of that particular place, or if it's people, the frequency of people, the number of people. These are the factors that go into the likelihood of an accident occurring as a result of that unsafe condition or unsafe practice. If it was a worker using the work equipment, say my worker was using armor drill without the PPE, that's my hazard, improper use of the drill or continuous use of a damaged drill, I'm going to say that the fact that the worker is not competent, if he's not competent, is part of my likelihood of an accident. The environment the worker is using the equipment in is part of my likelihood. Proper selection of a drill bit, a lot of things could factor into my likelihood. The worker's postures, the duration of that particular job. So things that can factor into my likelihood. Then I go to the severity. For the severity, the best way to do it is make it progressive. So from minor injuries to major injury. For example, if we're working with electricity, we start from minor discomfort, threshold cramps, breathing difficulties. We get to cardiovascular issues, fibrillation, and then you graduate to possible electrocution. So you're going to go, progressively into the risk. Exposure to asbestos will lead to respiratory irritation, possible nausea, discomfort, and then you go to mesothelioma, you go to asbestos-related lungs cancer, and so you make it progressive like that. That would be that for the likelihood and severity. For the next section and the very last one, you can see is part 3 is kind of it's kind of straightforward. The very last section is where you talk about the impact of your control. Why did you select that control? Why? What is the importance of that control? And there are 3 things you're doing in this last section for every justification. First, you're going to talk about the impact of that control. That is, if we implement that control, what's going to happen? What is the effect of that control going to be in our workplace? If we isolate that cable and then relocate the cable from my hazard of electrical cable dangling, the impact is going to be that there wouldn't be any electrical charges around the gate, and all the possible severity that comes with have been literally eliminated as a result of removing that particular hazard. So whatever your control measure is, talk about the direct impact of that control measure to the hazard that you have brought that control measure from. Basically, the second thing you do is to defend your time scale. For that control measure, if you go back to your part 2, you've given a time scale for completion of that action. Or for example, if I say they should remove all asbestos-contained material in a particular facility, that could take years, a year, 2 years, depending on the size of my organization, the resources available. I just have to defend my time scale. So I go to a construction site and I see that there's been a lot of manual handling, carrying cement, carrying blocks and all that, or carrying really heavy materials, and I say, okay, you people should go and procure the forklift trucks. I would give them enough time. I can't say they should do that in 2 days, 3 days. Whatever time scale I've given, I need to defend that particular time scale in this section. So I have said they should go and action this in 3 months because it would require budget meeting. It would require a lot of things to be put in place, this and that and that. I've said they should do this in 2 weeks or 1 week because it doesn't require any kind of additional financial implication. It just needs human resource, time, and personnel. And this can be actioned within this time frame. The very last thing that you need to do in this section is to discuss if that particular control measure that you've cited has the possibility to eliminate the risk. Okay, so is the risk going to be totally eliminated? If yes, tell us how. If it's not going to be totally eliminated, then what is going to happen? Is it going to drastically reduce the risk? That's what you're going to be stating in that particular section. So if we procure a forklift truck, it will eliminate all work-related upper limb musculoskeletal disorders that are associated with manually carrying this load, lifting the load from one place to another. The excessive force that will be required for lifting would also be eliminated, as that will now be mechanized. So basically, that's what I'm going to put at that particular section. So all you need to do is select 3 actions, come up with the likelihood and severity for the hazard, and then talk about the risk control measures, basically. Okay, so that'll be that for the part 3. I will also be sharing the video of part 4 alongside this one. Thank you very much for watching. If there's anything that you want to add, you could please do that in the comment section for those of us that will be reading. If you have any questions also, you could drop it in the comment section. If there's anything I have omitted, you could also do well to remind me. Someone in one of my comments asked me to make a video of how to do the how to go about the open book exam. I will find time to do that possibly soon, and then I will share the video. Thank you very much for watching. My Yoruba accent kicked in. Bye.